Having the right tools is important. Having the right tools and knowing when and how to use each tool is even more important. It's hard to cut wood if you're just using a hammer. To quote my dad, what you use to cut that? A beaver? And so on that note, let's get hacking. What's up, everyone? I'm James with Microvellum, and welcome back to Wood Hacks. The previous 6 episodes were part of a series focused on the spreadsheet side of Microvellum. This episode will finally be on something else. Psych! Don't worry, there are only 8 parts to this mini-series, so only one more after this. In this episode, we're going to discuss Workbook Designer, how it differs from Edit Design Data, and when you'd want to use it over Edit Design Data. Let's go ahead and jump right into things. Okay, so for the sake of easy access, I'm going to start in Edit Design Data. I'll go ahead and open it for the product we built in the previous episode. With Edit Design Data open, I'm going to click on the Workbook Designer icon to launch the app. First thing you're going to notice is that a bunch of workbooks have been loaded. You can go back to part 4 in the series for a description of what each workbook is. Now, before we get too much further into things, let's discuss some of the differences between Workbook Designer and Edit Design Data. Edit Design Data, as we've learned through this series, is the most common and frequently used spreadsheet interface. It's built to be more user-friendly. Yes, I heard what I just said out loud. It is more user-friendly. Many of the tools that exist in Edit Design Data are not available in Workbook Designer. For example, the formula editor, the insert and delete prompts functions, and the Microvellum clipboard, just to name a few. Workbook Designer is more of a development tool, and for much of its deeper uses, should be accessed by more experienced users. But just like there are tools in Edit Design Data that don't exist in Workbook Designer, there are tools in Workbook Designer that don't exist in Edit Design Data, like font and formatting, the ability to insert new worksheets, or the ability to add new prompts to workbooks that you can't access otherwise, like the project wizard and material file wizards. So why and when would you want to use Workbook Designer? There are several reasons you'd want to use Workbook Designer. In the instance of using it inside Edit Design Data, you'd most likely access it to help reverse engineer formulas. For example, if a formula is referencing a global variable or a variable from another workbook, you can use Workbook Designer to navigate to the area where that value or calculation is being referenced, which will help you figure out how things are being calculated. Back in Workbook Designer, let's take a minute to discuss the icons and options at the top. First up, New, Open, and Save, followed by Print and Print Preview. I'm going to assume that we're all pretty familiar with those, so let's move on. After that is the Set Microvellum title icon. This is used when you're accessing Workbook Designer as a standalone application. We'll cover that in the last episode, but this will convert the file name to the letter reference of the workbook, G, L, M, and so on. Next are some more tools we should be familiar with: undo, redo, cut, copy, paste, find, and replace. After those, we have the Show Workbook Explorer button. Now, this tool is helpful for formatting and inserting worksheets, but unless you're in charge of library development for your company, you're probably not going to be using this. In fact, if you aren't the person responsible for library development for your company, you should probably steer clear of this. After that, we have the Name Manager tool. This is helpful for adding, editing, deleting, finding defined names, and detecting if any defined names are overlapping, meaning a singular cell has more than one defined name assigned to it. I know I mentioned you can use this tool to add defined names, but I want to clarify there is a much better way to add defined names than through this interface, and we'll get to that later. Next is the Watch window. This is very helpful if you want to see what happens to the value of a cell in another workbook when a reference prompt value is changed in a different workbook. Next is the function arguments tool. We should be familiar with this tool by now, so let's go ahead and move on to the last icon, which is add comment. Seems pretty obvious what this does, but one thing to mention, comments that are added are only visible in Workbook Designer. They don't transfer over to Edit Design Data. All right, let's talk a minute now about some of the tools in the menus. In the Insert menu, there are a couple worth mentioning here. First up, Defined Name. This is a much easier way to define a cell or a range of cells versus the Name Manager, especially when using the From Selection option. From Selection will allow you to select multiple cells and define the names of them based on a location that you specify. For example, if you were to add prompts like those in the local workbook or wizard workbooks, you can select both columns A and B and define the names based on the value in the left column. However, if you're working in the local sub or nested sub workbooks, add your defined names through Edit Design Data. So much easier. You can also access the functions from the Insert menu. In the Format menu, Cells, also accessible using Control-1, will open the formatting options for a cell or range. Want to change the font? Add a cell highlight? This is the tool to use. In the Window menu, the options Cascade, Tile Horizontal, and Tile Vertical have to do with the placement and view of each of the workbooks. Back in older versions like V6.7, I used this a lot to tile all the local workbooks of a library folder, like base cabinets. With them tiled, I could quickly jump between the workbooks, paste new formulas or whatever, and then save them all back to the library in one fell swoop. Other tools you may use in the Window menu would be Split and Freeze or Unfreeze panes. These allow you to lock columns and or rows so they stay visible when scrolling through the spreadsheet. And the last thing you'd likely use the Window menu for would be to jump between the workbooks if you've maximized them. And there you have it, a crash course on Workbook Designer. If you plan on doing anything other than chasing down variables to reverse engineer formulas, I suggest you work first on really learning what you are or are not capable of doing in Edit Design Data before attempting to make changes in Workbook Designer. Last thing you want to do is tick off your boss because you screwed up the global workbook and now your project is broken. Or worse, your library is broken. Been there, done that. 'Tis no bueno. That's a wrap for this episode of Wood Hacks. Don't miss the exciting conclusion to this mini-series. What's exciting about spreadsheets, you ask? The answer to that is everything. Anyway, I'll catch y'all in the next episode. Until then, stay sharp, oh, you know the thing. Nothing in the world ticks me off more than getting halfway, 3/4 of the way through recording and then realize that you didn't push record. Here we go again. It's hard to cut tools. This is why I don't rely on my brain, people. Goodness, even my eyes. I don't trust my eyes. I don't trust my brain. I can't read. Okay, so for easy, oh my, goodness, that scared me. God, that was a mouthful. I couldn't get through that. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't say window. I keep saying window. 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 Reminds me of Willow. Who remembers that movie? Me. Willow. And the last thing you'd likely to use in the Window menu would be And the last thing you'd likely use the Window menu for would be to jump between the workbooks if you have them maximized. And the last thing, sorry, I can't get by. Oh, I gotta regroup. I gotta pause this. Okay, let's bring it back. We're good now. No, we're not. Ooh. Oh, crap. can't do this. Oh, crap. Oh, I'm going to bust a gut. I'm going to sweat. Now I got to, oh. Oh, crap. Okay, I gotta get past this. Holy crap. We got this now. We got this. We gotta get this. We'd be here all night on one freaking sentence. This is crap. Okay, here we go. And the last thing you'd likely use the window menu for would be to jump between the workbooks if you've maximized them. If you plan on doing anything other than chasing down variables, one time in my entire life, I would like to get through a script without screwing it up.